Okay, over to you, Deputy Leader, to welcome everyone.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Executive on the 17th of March. And I'd like to hand over now to Democratic Services, Mr. Andrew Melchior.
Thank you very much, Deputy Leader, and welcome everyone to the Executive on the 17th of March. A slightly delayed start due to some technical problems, but we're all ready to go now. Hopefully everybody will be able to hear everything that's going on today, and we'll have no further technical difficulties with the meeting. But obviously, if we do, we will stop the proceedings. But fingers crossed, we carry on. Could I just ask to make sure that everybody is on mute, just to cut down on any feedback? And the format for today's meeting will be as per the agenda published, and the recording will be made available onto the council's committee pages within the next 2 working days. I'll hand back to the Deputy Leader now just to do a roll call. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Jill Slocum. I'm the Deputy Leader of the District Council Executive. I would like to ask each member to introduce themselves and also our officers. Can I start off with Councillor Caswell?
Good morning. I can clearly, Mike Caswell, portfolio holder for infrastructure and transport. I can clearly see and hear everything.
Thank you. Councillor Doddridge.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Councillor Lance Doddridge, portfolio holder for customer access, and unfortunately at the moment, digital delivery. I'm seeing here everything.
Councillor Gilling.
Good morning, Deputy Leader. Sorry to be adding to the technical problems, but Councillor Andrew Gilling, portfolio holder for housing. And I can see and hear everything. At least I can see everything, but I can't hear it all.
You can't hear it all?
I can hear some of it, but not all of it.
Okay. Can you just, I think we need to check on that then, please. Mrs. Wellman, what is the situation?
There was a bit of some feedback somewhere. Chairman, I don't know if it's with you. Have you got your microphone in the right place?
I'm not on a microphone.
Right, okay.
I'm not on a microphone for that very reason.
Ah, right, okay. In which case it's coming from somewhere else, isn't it? Councillor Gilling, I can, there's a bit of background noise, but I can hear everything. Are you not able to hear everything?
Can you unmute, Councillor Gilling? Unmute.
I'm able to hear some of it, but not all.
Okay.
I think the best thing we can do then is when we go through the reports, if you can just indicate when we come to decisions, let us know what you didn't hear. And
yes,
what
certainly we'll get by.
Yeah, you're well versed with all the reports. I know that. So perhaps we'll check with Mrs. Wellman each time. Is that okay?
And also, could you, sorry, Chairman, could everybody make sure they definitely have got their microphone turned off, other than obviously the Chairman? Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Mark Healy.
Councillor Mark Healy is not present today, Jill.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Keane. Can you unmute?
Yes, good morning. Councillor Janet Keane. I can see and hear everyone. Jill, yours is the only one where the sound quality is not good. Everyone else is crystal clear. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll tell you what I'll do. I will turn it down a little bit. Maybe there's nothing in the room. I'm completely alone, so there's no one here. So I should be fine. Is that better, Councillor Keane? Is that better, anyone? I'll just turn it down a little bit. Perhaps I had it too high.
Yes, I know that much better. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Can we also, I would like to now ask the senior leader team. So can I start with the Chief Executive, please?
Good morning, everyone. Bob Brown, Chief Executive. I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Deputy Chief Executive.
Good morning, Deputy Chief Executive Doug Bamsey. I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Turner.
Hi, it's Alison Monteith. I'm here on behalf of Alison Turner. It's okay. Yes, I can see and hear everything.
Thank you. Mrs. Wellman.
Good morning. Yes, Melanie Wellman, Assistant Director for Legal and Governance, and I can see and hear everything. Thank you.
And Mrs. Ford, Ms. Ford,
She's not present at the meeting today, Deputy Leader.
thank you. And Mr. Tandy. We have other members of the council. I just wanted to make sure. Mr. Tandy?
Good morning. Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yes, Simon Tandy, Corporate Performance Manager, and I can clearly see and hear everyone.
Thank you. Do we have any other members of the council who wish to introduce themselves as officers of the council? Is that everyone introduced? Mr. Mulherish, is there anyone else who needs to introduce?
No, I think that's fine until we come on to the reports from the reporting officers, and they will report and confirm who they are at that stage. So if we move on to the agenda.
I advise you that there are non-committee members and officers present at the virtual meeting, which you will hear of as we go through. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Yes, Deputy Leader, just apologies from the Leader of Council today. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the meeting from the 3rd to the 16th of December. And can I ask for approval of these minutes as a correct record, please? Councillor Gilling, approve those. Thank you. Declarations of interest, item 3. Do we have any? No. Item 4.
Sorry, Deputy Leader, may I come in? Just a reminder to Homes and Sedgemoor board members that there are items involving Homes and Sedgemoor on the agenda today.
Councillor Keane, declare an interest? Yes, and Councillor Budridge.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, apologies. I'll declare personal interest in those.
Right, thank you. We have item 4 is urgent business. We have none. Public speaking. We have no members of the public registered to speak. Item 6 is the corporate dashboard, and I'd like to hand over to Councillor Dudridge, who will then in turn introduce Councillor Tandy. Sorry, yeah. Mr. Tandy, I do apologise.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Here we are at last. Before I hand over Mr. Tandy, I'll just say that as members can see from the report, performance remains exceptionally high throughout the council. Great reflection on staff and the council, considering the huge amount of time and resources which have been consumed by the COVID response. The quarterly performance indicators, members can see that on page 20, we have 25% of indicators significantly above target, only 5% below target, which shows the strength of our performance, especially in customer-facing services like Sedgemoor Digital and monitoring services. Performance continues to be high despite large numbers of customer contacts. One thing we flagged up in the last quarter is a slightly disappointing performance around planning registration. But I know Councillor Slocum had a chat with her yesterday. I think she's got some news on that. She can give us some positive news. Very happy to take any questions, but apart from that, I'll hand over to Mr. Tandy to give us a little bit more detail.
Thank you. Mr. Tandy, if you'd like to come in.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Thank you, Councillor Dudridge. Okay, I will try and keep this short and sweet because obviously we've lost some time already. So just a quick overview of what the dashboard is showing. All of our types of actions, including high-level operational actions and audit recommendations, are within our set tolerances. There are still a large proportion of operational actions which are due at the end of the month, i.e. the end of the financial year. So I'll be keeping a close eye on those in conjunction with the assistant directors. I have had one-to-ones with each of the assistant directors about their remaining actions, and there's confidence that those remaining ones will be delivered, and those that there was less confidence about, we've already made changes to, whether that's a case of they've been cancelled because they were no longer deliverable due to our current circumstances, or they've been extended in time, so they'll be pushed forward into next year. Importantly, about performance indicators, we've recorded really strong levels of performance again in the third quarter of 2020/21. 83% of performance indicators are on target, and this is the third consecutive quarter in which our corporate target has been surpassed, in spite of the challenges faced due to COVID. Just a quick mention of a couple that are in the red. So these are significantly off target. One of the clean surroundings indicators on the collection of fly tip material, which is SSCL1, is off target for the months October to December 2020. This is due to staff sickness and the need for the staff that were in to use up their annual leave. There was a bit of a backlog of annual leave last year because of the circumstances we faced. And that's expected to be back on track in this quarter, quarter four. Usual suspects in planning registration, there's two there that are still significantly off target. The resource issues are behind that, and they continue to have that negative effect. But hopefully we're on course to be resolving this with, I believe we have recruited an additional planning technician. Jill, you may be able to add a bit of information on that, or Stuart. And then just one other one to mention, which isn't significantly off target, but has fallen into the amber zone, so slightly off target, is one of the benefits indicators on changes of circumstances. And I've spoken to one of the senior benefits officers, and the reason behind this is an increased workload, again, understandable in the circumstances. They've also taken on the processing of test and trace payments. In fact, there were 314 of those claims processed during the quarter three, October to December 2020. And also during that time, 2 members of staff left, 1 full-time and 1 part-time. I have been assured that there is recruitment happening there, or at least there has been some recruitment and there's further recruitment happening. But also with a slight warning for future quarters that obviously with new members of staff coming in, there may be some resource strain there in training those members of staff. So just a bit of a heads up on the potential impact that may have in the future. Okay, so happy to take any questions on the dashboard as a whole.
Thank you, Mr. Tandy. Thank you. I would like to just report that, yes, there is going to be significant changes in the planning. Planning itself is done exceptionally well. I think it's just the enforcement area where we've had problems, and we're now into recruitment. In fact, I think we have recruited the post in addition. So we're looking to make planning changes. But rather than me waffle on, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Hewlett, who'll give you a much more precise outcome to that. Mr. Hewlett.
Thank you. Exactly what Jill said. So, no, what we've done, we've got some short-term measures and some longer-term measures. So, part of the problem we've had is one of our technicians was redeployed to the major projects team and has been for some time. We've gone back and backfilled that post now. So, we've got a 6-month role that is due to start next week, which will give some additional resilience to the team. We're also looking at some process changes, in particular the way we handle planning comments. As you can imagine, planning applications are very contentious. We get lots and lots of objections and comments, and some support, not quite so much support as objections. But there's quite a clunky process that has to go through in terms of redacting personal information. So that hasn't helped since we've had to do that over the last couple of years, and it does slow up the process. So what we're looking at with discussions with Craig and his team in IT is doing some automatic redaction on personal information. It will still mean we need to scan through some of the letters that we receive to make sure there's nothing libelous or slanderous, etc. in there. But it will, for the majority of correspondence, make life a lot easier. So hopefully we'll speed that up, free up a bit of resource so we can focus back on registering planning applications. And I guess the key thing for me really is the actual overall planning performance hasn't dropped, despite the fact that we have these issues at the first stage of the applications. We are able to still deal with things pretty much in time and keep the performance up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hewlett. Thank you for that. That's very, very kind. And I think we have done a significant amount of work in planning, so I'm very, very pleased about that, as everyone. I think the council has done a tremendous job. Can I go first to members of the council? Are there members of the council that wish to speak at this point before I go to the executive? If you can, either way, I'll try to pick up. I know not everyone can get into the message box. I do appreciate that. Councillor Keane.
Thank you. On Mr. Tander's point of the changes of circumstances and claims there, the citizens' advice almost every week report that this is a constant, with difficulties both in the initial claims and also in the section where it's to do with personal independence payments. Now, I'm not sure if there's been any detailed research done as to the cause of this persistence, or whether it is, as you say, simply the numbers overwhelm the amount of people who actually administer and process claims and check them out. But I don't know if there's anything that can be done at another level to perhaps find reasons for this. Thank you.
Mr. Tandy, do you have anything to say? Any other points to make?
No, I mean, the changes of circumstances are obviously common at the moment because of the fact that people are in and out of work. The changes to the regulations around COVID have had a significant impact on how often people's circumstances are changing. I couldn't say any further than that. But as another note to future results, obviously the furlough scheme is potentially coming to an end, or is currently planned to come to an end fairly soon, and that again will have a real impact on the benefits service, because there'll be potentially a number of new claimants coming in, so their workload again is potentially going to be significantly increased.
My apologies, trying to stop a phone from continually ringing. Do we have any other members of the executive wish to say? Councillor Duddridge.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Just to thank you and Mr. Howlett for the work you've done around the planning issues. I know me nagging you for the last 6 or 9 months probably hasn't added much to your joy de vivre, but like I said, it sounds, from what Mr. Howlett said, sounds like, you know, there's been some lateral thinking going on, especially around the way of treating stuff as far as IT is concerned. Hopefully we'll see the results in the next few months, but thanks very much indeed for the work you've done.
Thank you very much. It has been a difficult process, and I commend, I would say this, that all departments have done a great job, but planning in particular has met the needs of everyone outside the council as well, so they have done a great job. So I think we don't need to be nagged necessarily because it's uppermost in our minds. So thank you. If no one else wishes to add to that, Councillor Duddridge, would you like to move the 2 recommendations, please?
Yeah, certainly. Very happy to move the recommendations, Deputy Leader.
The 2 recommendations. Request the portfolio holder provides an update, proposed corrective action by the next executive meeting, and request it is escalated under the council's performance framework to an area of high importance. I will second that recommendation. Thank you very much. Mr. Melhuish, do I need to say everyone in favour? All right, Mr. Melhuish.
Yes, please, Deputy Leader, if you could. Well, I can ask the question if you like. If there are any members against or any members abstaining, please could they indicate now?
Favour? Any members against? No, I think that's truly carried.
Okay, I'm happy to confirm then for agenda item 6, those 2 recommendations are unanimously carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Tandy. And here we have you on the stage again, Mr. Tandy. This is the quarterly performance monitoring. I hand over to Councillor Duddridge, who in turn will hand to Simon Tandy and Ben Lane from Homes in Sedgemoor. So I've got to Councillor Duddridge.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Yeah, before I hand over, like I said, again, another very positive report. Couple of things I'd flag up. We've got a report, some figures on procurement, which is a new feature of the report. Be able to give us a little bit of flavour of what we're actually spending money on and what's coming down the line in the next 6 or 9 months. The other thing in the report on the grants committee, I don't think the figures are in there for the last committee that sat a couple of weeks ago, end of February. I happen to sit in on that, just have interest, and I think Councillor Keane be able to tell us, but I think the committee pretty well spent their budget, apart from maybe 1,500 or a couple of £1,000. I know they had a lot of applications in on that last meeting. And I think that also is a great tribute to our members for engaging with our communities to try and get get this money out there to people. Obviously, a lot of these community groups haven't been able to function for best part of a year. But apart from that, like I said, I'm very happy to take any questions. But I know Mr. Lane's here for the homes in Sedgemoor details, Mrs. Monteith for any of the financial reports, or Mr. Tandy for any detail on anything else. Thank you.
Mr. Tandy, would you like to?
Thank you, Councillor Duddridge. Yes, so just to clarify. Explain the information in the tables, so that's something to look forward to in a couple of months' time. And just also with the grants side of things, as Councillor Duddridge mentioned, the report is currently showing that just under 20 budget had been spent. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Sorry, my machine went funny. I don't know if you can hear me still.
Oh no,
okay.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So I think it was around about 19,500 of the £50,500 budget had been spent by the end of Q3. And as Councillor Duddridge mentioned, there's been a grants committee since then, held last month. And in the Q4 report, that will show that the remainder of the budget was spent at that meeting. So the details of that will be in the next report. Obviously happy to take any questions on the Sedgemoor content of the report before we hand over to Homes in Sedgemoor.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Members of the council, are there any questions for Mr. Duddridge or Mr. Tandy? Members of the executive? Just giving it enough time because it seems a bit slow at the minute. Any members of the executive? Well, I would say, Mr. Tandy, that's a really good sign, so I wouldn't worry. You're obviously doing everything right, and Mr. Duddridge, you're doing everything okay. So keep up the great work, because it's important that the areas where we see efficiencies in, we obviously need to be spotted. So thank you very much. Mr. Duddridge, do we hand over to Homes in Sedgemoor now? Are you happy to hand over to Mr. Lane?
Yeah, quite happy to hand over, Mr. Lane.
Would you like to give your report, please?
Good morning, all. It's Ben Lane, the Director of Finance and Performance at Homes in Sedgemoor. I think I'm joined by our Chief Exec, Peter, as well, in case there's any questions that the councillors or others might have. We're looking obviously at the quarterly performance up to the end of December for Homes in Sedgemoor. It has been, a challenge these last 9 months, and I think you'll see in some of the performance indicators indications of those challenges. Firstly, I'd like to sort of say that I'm sort of mindful that the information that we've perhaps provided over the last sort of few quarters has grown quite a bit. There's an awful lot of detail that we do provide across to yourselves for scrutiny. We're very keen to work with our sort of client officer colleagues in SDC to explore what the information looks like for 21-22. I'm mindful that perhaps the solution may be to focus solely on the management agreement KPIs, which people may be aware we're currently reviewing the management agreement document and the associated KPIs for 21-22. We hope to have those approved shortly. The current sort of suite of KPIs is made up of those management agreement KPIs. It also includes our KPIs that are associated with our corporate strategy, plus KPIs that are of operational significance. I mentioned the challenges that I think we faced in the last 9 months, perhaps quite acutely in the area of voids, in terms of the relet time of void properties and the knock-on effect that that has to void losses. We've also had challenges with the delivery of the capital programme, as we've worked very closely with our contractors during the year to respond to all the rules and regulations that have been placed upon us through the COVID-19 sort of situation. So delivery against the capital programme, if you like, has been lower than we had hoped. We're also seeing high numbers of antisocial behaviours that we're managing the implications and the impact of as well. What we have also included in the suite, which I hope is helpful, is a sector analysis that's produced by an organisation called Housemark. We've worked with Housemark each and every month since the sort of commencement of the pandemic back in March to supply data to them about how things are working out here in homes in Sedgemoor. And it's pleasing to see, if you like, that although we've had dips in our performance, that we still remain strong performers when compared to the sector. We have remarkably good results in arrears, for example, overall. I think that's been evidenced through it. We also have a very important part of our performance is how we're doing with the compliance agenda overall. You'll pick up that the performance at the end of December has been assessed as amber. This is an independent assessment from an external party who we've been working with over the last 9 months or so. We also provide, again, as people may be aware, a detailed compliance report on a monthly basis to SDC colleagues, as well as obviously sharing that through our own governance channels as well. We have introduced some additional resource in the current year to assist both the lettings team and the neighbourhoods team. And we're very pleased that in building our budgets for next year, for 21-22, that we've managed to retain an additional neighbourhood officer to help support the challenges that are faced in that team for the full 21-22 period, and also to continue the resource that's been added into the lettings team for the first quarter of 21-22. I'll pause at that stage, I think. I'll take any specific questions that anybody may have, if that's okay.
Okay. I have some questions before. If any members of the council wish to say anything, Mr. Lane, at the moment. Okay, Mr. Lane, I was just going to say, I'm astounded that the arrears is doing so well. I think that's very, very good. I was saddened to see that you've suffered quite significantly with staff due to COVID, and that is quite significant there. And I see that you're getting back to numbers, but I just hope, pass on our best wishes to all staff that suffered and not doing well, and I hope that will start to get back to its original peak. For repairs, I think. Oh, sorry, carry on, Mr. Lane.
Sorry, Deputy Leader. I mean, it's a very faint audio there.
Sorry.
I don't know if others managed to pick it up a little bit more clearly. I think you acknowledged the arrears performance and also the staff.
It was too high, sorry. Yeah, I think what I was saying was, I'll say it again. I'm glad to see the arrears are doing very, very well. The staffing level, I'm just concerned about your staffing level that you've suffered, your department has suffered with COVID, and obviously there's a significant loss there, and just want to hope that your staff are getting back online, and I wish them all the very best from us, because that is quite a significant loss you've had in your team, but you've still managed to keep up with things, which is really good. The other point, I'll say them all and then I'll come back to you. On the repairs, I'm very pleased to see that you kept up with the repairs. There was a dip, obviously, but not for that time. I think the repairs are doing very, very well. The lettings also coming back up. I'm extremely pleased to see that you've done gas safety, validity on the gas safety, which is very, very important. So I'm very pleased about that. So just wanted to know if you'd like to make any comments on those.
Thank you for those observations, Deputy Leader. I think, picking up on issues like gas certificate performance, we have focused all our energy and efforts working safely as we possibly can to make sure that those critical areas of the business that we oversee continued through this period. There have, as you'd appreciate, been issues around access on occasionally, people's reluctance at times during the last 9 months to allow access in the way that's required to ensure that this occurs. But we have an awful lot of eyes on this, an awful lot of resource that we're also deploying to make sure that most important of the work that we do is undertaken. The repairs, again, we've got to pass on credit to our main contractor, MD, who we've worked very well with over the last 9 months, who themselves have gone about their business delivering what has been required, obviously in such difficult times. So I think I'd like to acknowledge the good work that they've done with us in that regard as well.
Thank you very much, and please pass on our best wishes, obviously, to your members of staff, and I do hope you know you are getting back to normal.
Thank you, and I will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I go to Councillor Caswell, please? Councillor Caswell.
Oh, thank you. Just to say, Deputy Leader, that I can't hear a word you're saying. It is muffled, and it sounds like you're in a tunnel or with something like air rushing by. I can't hear a thing. Everybody else is good, but yours at the moment is not good.
Okay, can I just hold the meeting for a moment? And Councillor, Mr. Andrew Mulhewis, can I speak to you? Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you, Deputy Leader. It's not the greatest audio, but I can hear you. Don't know if you want to just pause the meeting.
Can I just pause the meeting just for one moment, please? That's okay. Just for one moment.
Just a thought. Sorry, it isn't just the deputy leader sound that's bad. Not that I'm picking up. There's a strange interference on a good many people speaking.
Just wonder whether there's a more general problem.
Yeah, because it goes that sort of strange
House. Yeah.
Strange Dalek sensation. When you were speaking just then, for example, it's just fine now, but it was a minute ago.
The headphones back in, because obviously the headphones, I took them off because we had a problem. So I'll try again. You never know. Sorry. Can anyone hear me now?
Yeah, that's what I can hear you. Okay.
Yep, I can hear you, John.
Headphones just don't work.
Oh, your headphones are not working, did you say?
They're just causing problems.
Okay.
I'll just try another try. I'll just try another bit. Hang on. Might be something else I can do here.
I think it might be your proximity to the laptop. If you
you sounded better now, Jill. Much better.
I think if have you just moved in closer to your laptop, Councillor Slocum? Because I think that might be just might be the issue. When you speak, if you could just lean into the laptop, I think that the microphone maybe have some sensitivity and not picking your voice up quite so well when you're sat back a little bit.
It's been a difficult technical day today, so I will do my very best. Is that better?
Yes, that sounds clearer here, definitely.
The microphone as high as possible. Mr. Lane, can you hear me now?
I can hear you a bit clearer. Yes, thank you.
That's much better than it was.
Thank you. I'm terribly sorry about this. I do apologise. I think we were going to go to Councillor Caswell. Did you want to say anything?
No, it's just I was finding it difficult to follow the conversation when you were speaking.
Yeah, I think you're not very clear from me either. So right, let's go back to Councillor Duddridge now.
Thank you, Deputy Leader. Yeah, just very briefly on the performance at Homes in Sedgemoor. Obviously, I'm a board member and I'm a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, and all the performance material is presented to both those committees. And even though some of it, if you look at it quickly, some of the performance indicators perhaps isn't where you think they should be, as Mr. Lane's explained, there's nothing there that I think is causing either audit and risk or the board as a whole massive concern at the moment. And as Mr. Lane said, when you judge it through housemark against industry standard, a lot of it is actually very good performance indeed. So certainly at the moment, I wouldn't speak for the board, but I think we're fairly comfortable with where we are performance-wise at the moment.
I think that's a good message to go back to Homes in Sedgemoor, that we are obviously the only significant area I think was staff, and that was our concern, and hopefully that will improve with time, and I think it will. But I think we need to thank the board for Homes in Sedgemoor for what they're doing, managing to go out there to do lettings, repairs, arrears, dealing with that, and this gas safety is is very commendable, and we thank you very much, and I hope you keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no one else wishes to speak, can I hand back to Councillor Douglas to move the recommendation?
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Leader. Yeah, I'm very happy to move the recommendation, sir. Thank you.
The two recommendations are to request an update report on issues. I'm on the right one, aren't I? Yeah. Throughout the report presented by the portfolio holder at the next executive, or request that there's escalated under the council's performance framework. It's an area of high importance. Those are the two recommendations. Do I have everyone in agreement with those recommendations, please? Is there anyone against? Anyone wishing to abstain? Okay, I think that's clearly carried, Mr. Melhirsch.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Leader. Agenda item 7, the two recommendations are carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I apologise about these sound issues. I do think it's probably out of our control, but we'll do the best we can. Item 8 now is the write-offs, and this is obviously the leader of council's portfolio. Rather than me waffle on the appropriate way, I would like to hand over to Anne-Marie Harding, please.
Good morning. Sorry, I didn't hear that. Yes, my name's Anne-Marie Hardy. I'm the Senior Recovery Officer within Finance and Property, and I bring a report to you today for the over £4,000 write-off that need executive approval. Ordinarily, these would come through to you on a quarterly basis, but obviously due to the current circumstances, they haven't been through to executive this financial year. So you have a report here for the over £4,000 executive write-offs for the whole of the current financial year.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Do we know exactly, I apologise because I'm on a different machine and I'm not able to, I can't remember exactly. Most of the write-offs, is it people leaving the property? Is it abscondment? Is it
Right. Abscondment is a very small percentage of the debts that have been put forward. We've got absconded debtors in here. We've got insolvency debtors in here, and unfortunately, half of them are just uncollectible debts.
I suppose one could say actually, with the amount of money that goes to the council, it's quite a small amount.
It is, yes.
Right off. So, thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions? Members of the council, does anybody want to say anything to the council? Members of the council, anyone wish to say anything? Oh, now members of the executive, Councillor King.
Thank you very much. The debt, it is always it's a serious, and it's serious as a corporate matter, but on a personal level, it is a major tragedy for so many families. Currently, the Citizens Advice have one of their more experienced advisors is doing a research paper on personal debt, some of which is because not only of the most extraordinary circumstances of the last year, when people have been forced to make unusual priorities, but there's of the income that goes into a family, sometimes things like paying off council tax has a lesser priority than paying off a loan shark. And one can see why, because of the fear that can be generated there. When the report has been completed, I think it might be very helpful if I ask that the Citizens Advice, if they would allow that report to come here to give more context to the figures that mount up to the overall debt that we cannot reclaim. Would you find that in any way helpful? Because there is very much of a personal level to this. I don't think it can be looked at just as figures in an impersonal way.
Thank you, Councillor King. The only thing I would say is it seems like, I've got it now, I do apologise, Anne-Marie, the personal bankruptcies, insolvency and deceased and the small level of absconders are generally the main areas which, in fairness, wouldn't necessarily Citizens Advice Bureau wouldn't be able to deal with. But I'd like to hand back to Anne-Marie if you'd like to make a comment, please.
Hello. Yeah, any reports that you have coming through from the CAB, I'd be welcome to read them and have a look through. Obviously, we've got new rules coming in with insolvency in May, so any reports, I'm more than happy and would welcome to have a read.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. Does anyone, Mr. Brown, Chief Executive, sorry.
Deputy Leader, I think I think Councillor Keane raises a good point. And I think we need to look at that support for debt and other things. But I think that needs to come into the context, perhaps around the support that we give to other people, rather than Anne-Marie's report, because I think Anne-Marie's report is about the reason why we write off debt, and is a sort of a technical financial process. But there is, I think, another piece of work where we would welcome that report in terms of the support that we give and debt issues that are coming through. And we'll work with perhaps officers to work out the best route to bring that through. As I say, I think perhaps not for this particular report, which is sort of more technical decision making for yourselves around writing off that debt, because at this stage, I think the debt's gone beyond a situation where assistance can be given. It's about the technical financial step of writing it off.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I would have loved to have said it succinctly like that, but that's what I meant. But thank you for that. Does anyone else have any points they would like to give to Anne-Marie? Okay, so Anne-Marie, I would like to move the recommendation, which is the Executive approve the write-off of debts greater than 4,000 for the financial year to 2020-21 as shown on our Appendix A. Do I have everyone in favour, please? Do I have anyone against? Anyone wishing to abstain? Mr. Mulhewich, I think that is clearly carried.
That is, Deputy Leader. So agenda item 8 is to write off the debts totalling £101,365.58. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Agenda item 9 is the capital strategy. This is the capital strategy. It gives us a high-level overview of how the capital expenditure, financing and treasury management activity contributes to the provision of local public services, along with an overview of how associated risk is managed and the implications of financial sustainability. There's recommendation. I'd like to go to the Chief Executive.
Deputy Leader, it really is very, very difficult to hear anything that you're saying. I think perhaps we're getting to a point where realistically, I think we're struggling to deal with these issues. I just wonder whether it's worthwhile either pausing, or whether if we all come out of the meeting and then come back into the meeting, whether that might assist us all. So
if we stop on agenda item 9, Mr. Mulhewich,
yep.
We all come out of the meeting and try to go back in and see if that will happen with Mr. Mulhewich. Is that okay?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
It's not sounding fine, but you know, some people are and some people aren't.
Jill, I wonder whether it might be better if you restart your computer and put your headphones in when you do that. Do you think that might help?
Restarting it. Oh.
Yeah, well, don't then. I don't know whether the sound is your issue because it's all over the place.
No, I can.
It's not just yours.
Not just mine. I can hear.
All right.
A bit muffled.
We have asked IT to investigate. So that is happening as we speak, but I haven't had any feedback on that. I have put that request out there, but I'm just waiting to hear back.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I've asked as well, so hopefully they come back to us on
this issue. And log back into the same, but give it a few minutes, perhaps that would be okay. Maybe, Mr. Mayor, we could we resume back at 12:10? For ourselves time to come back in, would that be okay? Mr.
Yes, yeah,
that's fine. Thank you.
And if members completely come out of the meeting, so leave it and then come back in, it may assist. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I apologise for that small interruption. It was a technical hearing audit problem. We want to make sure everybody can hear quite clearly. I think it has been resolved, so thank you very much. We now resume back to agenda item 9, which is the capital strategy 2021-22. This is the capital strategy that gives us a high level overview of how capital expenditure, financing and treasury management activity contributes to the provision of local public services, along with an overview of how associated risk is managed and the implications of future financial sustainability, which is a really important document. I'm sure everyone's read it. There is one recommendation, but before that, I'd like to hand over to Alison Monteith, please.
Hi, I'm just going to try and present my screen so that I can take you through some of the tables. I don't want to go through the report in too much detail because I'm sure we've all been here long enough today. So can you all see the capital strategy?
We can.
Brilliant. So as you said, the capital strategy gives a high level overview of our capital expenditure and our expenditure plans over the next 5 years. So some of this will be made up from budgets that have already been approved at the Green Book, tax set and rent set, but it's also made up of officers' estimations of what we're likely to be doing in the future over the next few years. So you can see table 1, it's a prudential indicator and it's an estimate of our capital expenditure built up from, like I say, everything that's been approved and everything that we think is out there. Obviously, as you go forward 5 years, it starts to get a little bit less and less because we were only looking at relatively short-term plans. Some of the things that we are looking at are things like the climate emergency. So I'm sure that there will be more and more budgets requested for this type of thing over the next few years, and that will feed into the capital strategy. Obviously, the customer access programme is a big part of the work we're doing. So let's go to the next table. So the next table looks at how we're going to finance all these types of capital expenditure over the next few years. And this table should match exactly to the capital expenditure in the first table. And it shows how we're likely to fund it over the next 5 years. So there's several ways that we can fund our capital receipts. Obviously, we need to be selling assets in order to gain capital receipts. We have sold some assets in the past, and if an asset isn't working for us, we need to consider selling it and getting a capital receipt in order to help us pay towards our capital plans for the future. We can fund from revenue or the Community Development Fund. Obviously, if we fund through revenue, that's quite expensive for our taxpayers. So we tend to try and avoid that where possible. We get external funding in whenever we possibly can. So if there's grant out there that we can apply for or funding from anyone else, we'll get that in if we possibly can. And of course, we can borrow. So a lot of this report and the next report, really, it's really important to consider how much you want to spend on your capital and how much you're going to need to borrow, because all of these elements here are quite limited. So it does tend to come down to borrowing. And you can see that our budget for 21-22 is quite a lot of borrowing there, and it has been in the last few years. Previous to that, we didn't do an awful lot of borrowing. We did have some capital receipts. We've used those now. The HRA is a separate ring-fenced fund, as you'll know. They also create capital receipts from the sale of council houses, but of course we don't get to keep all of that. The HRA can fund from revenue, and it's got quite a positive business plan going forward for the future. So it can afford to fund from revenue. The major repairs reserve is built up of the amount set aside for depreciation every year, and obviously that is spent on improving our council stock. And of course the HRA as well can borrow. We've also over the last couple of years financed service loans and funding for our commercial properties, and both of that has been through borrowing. But for both of those, we make sure that we are borrowing at a rate where actually what we're spending it on is still bringing in income. So the net effect is a positive effect, either where we have to borrow. Just because we borrow rather than paying from revenue doesn't mean that the council tax or rent payer gets away without having to fund all of this capital. Obviously, the money has to go through revenue at some point. So there's a statutory repayment that we have to make, which you should all be aware of because I've raised it before. It's a minimum revenue provision. And this table just makes it quite clear how much our minimum revenue provision is likely to be over the next few years. So, for example, you can see that our commercial investment property, although we're borrowing from that, we do have to make an MRP provision every year, and it's almost £1 million in the next few years, and that's a charge to revenue to pay for the borrowing for this. So it is quite significant. 1920 for capital loans looks really high, but that's because we're expecting someone to repay a loan. That should actually be in that table. I've put it one side. I've just realised that's in totally the wrong column. We're expecting someone to repay a large loan before the end of March this year. So that's quite a big jump. So that MRP will be matched by the loan repayment. It's not a cost to the authority. One of the prudential indicators we have to look at, and it's important for this committee to look at and understand, is about our capital financing requirements. So that's the amount of money that we have funded from borrowing in the past. And you can see that's quite some significant figures there. So going forward a few years, it's up to about £150 million that we will have used borrowing to fund our capital. A little bit later on, we'll look at the table that looks at the actual borrowing, because we don't actually externalise that borrowing. Sometimes we will borrow from our own general fund or the HRA if we've got positive cash flow. So we don't have that amount of borrowing at the moment. So I mentioned very briefly capital receipts earlier on. So this is my estimates of capital receipts over the next few years. Not very much in asset sales because we've not got too much to sell there. So Treasury Management, just summarising the loans we've got at the moment, nearly £1 million of loans, and investments, we've got about £40 million at the moment. The Pwlb has changed its lending terms. So actually, if we are going to continue with our commercial borrowing, we need to consider whether we will be allowed to borrow from the Pwlb. But I think that's a conversation moving forward that we need to have. At the moment, there are no issues with that at all. So this is the indicator about the capital finance requirement and the actual debt we've got outstanding. So this is an important table. So the capital financing requirement, the amount of capital that we have notionally borrowed to fund, is in the bottom line, but the amount of actual borrowing that we've taken out externally is in the top line, and that must not exceed your CFR. So this is a table that's really important. That top line must not exceed the bottom line. As you can see, going forward, it does start to get quite close, but that's what you would expect if you've financed expenditure by borrowing. You would expect at some point to have to externalise that debt and actually take that borrowing out. The difference between those two is internal borrowing. We're borrowing it from our own funds and from positive cash flow. So the Treasury Management strategy goes to the Audit and Governance Committee. So we, members of that committee, Audit and Standards, will have seen and approved the Treasury Management strategy at all before. So this is just a summary of where we are at the moment with our investments. Pooled funds, we've got £31 million in pooled funds, and we don't expect to have surplus funds to put in those anymore. We'll be keeping those out. They are long-term funds. Fixed term deposits, we tend not to be using at the moment because interest rates are really low. We keep all of our money on call, and we keep that to a minimum because interest rates on that are practically zero and potentially going to become negative. So the strategy then talks about our commercial activities, things like investments in loans for service providers and commercial activities. It talks about the revenue budget implications there. So it's looking at financing costs as a proportion of our net revenue stream. So you can quite clearly in that table see how much our financing costs for the above borrowing that I've talked about is impacting on our revenue. You can also then on the revenue see the interest that we're getting in from service loans and the interest that we're getting in from these commercial rents that we have borrowed to fund. The next report that I'm going to be going through also looks at this as well. So these reports mesh quite nicely together. The last little bit is just about knowledge and skills of staff that are involved in putting together the capital strategy. So hopefully that's just very briefly taking you through our strategy on capital and some of the figures involved. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Everybody hear that? Okay. Is there a playback? I'm getting a playback on the sound. Is everybody all right? Thank you very much, Mrs. Monteith. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Members of the council? Don't think there's anyone here actually. Members of the executive? No questions at all? No. The only question I wanted to ask Mrs. Monteith, if I hope you're still here. Yes, sorry. Yeah, sorry. Thank you for explaining that on with the CFR, the closeness to some the amounts I was a bit concerned about, but you've explained that very, very well. It is probably, you're very cool and you know exactly what you're doing, but to us it probably sounds a little bit concerning, but I think you've got it. I think that was well explained. Thank you very much. There is one recommendation on there. Let me go back to the right one. Sorry. One recommendation to recommend the capital strategy report for the 2021-22 to the council for approval. I'm happy to recommend that. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Keane to second that. Is everyone in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? I think that's clearly carried, Mr. Melhirsch.
Yes, thank you very much. The capital strategy will now go forward to the full council meeting on the 24th of March.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And now we have Mrs. Monteith again to be on queue. This is item number 10. This is the investment strategy non-treasury report 2021. And this sets out the overall strategy for our service investments and commercial investments for the next for this year and next year. So can I hand over without further ado to Mrs. Monteith?
I'm just going to present my screen again so I can go through it. So like I said, this is very closely linked to the previous report, but this is specifically looking at our investments, which are non-treasury. So our treasury investments are covered in the report that goes to Audit and Standards Committee. This report is to look at our non-treasury type investments. So treasury investments would be those investments of our surplus cash flow and our general fund and HRA balances. Non-treasury investments are where we have actively spent money on investing. So we have to fund that. That's why that type of money, that type of investment actually goes into the capital strategy, the previous report, because it is capital expenditure. So the first area of non-treasury investment are the service loans. So over the last few years, we have approved several loans to subsidiaries, local businesses, charities and the community. We don't have any more loans in the pipeline as far as I know at the moment, but they could come up at any point. We always make sure that if we are going to lend, like I said before, we lend at an improved interest rate to that which we would have to borrow. In the accounts, we do have to make a loss allowance. So we take a look at all of the individual loans and we make an assessment as to whether they have already defaulted or whether they are likely to default, and we make a loss allowance in the accounts. This doesn't impact on the bottom line of the accounts, it's just for information, and it's an idea for you as a committee to see the risk that we are taking when we are lending. I must say that we've never actually had any true losses written off to the accounts. So this is just an allowance so you could see potentially what we could lose in the next 12 months. So the next bit is our commercial investments in property. Obviously, the council approved £50 million budget to spend on commercial investments, and we have now spent almost all of that. So I think that's all we're going to spend at the moment. You can see here, these are the properties that we've bought and which you will all know about. The cost of purchase here includes all of the purchasing costs. So it would include stamp duty and legal costs and everything like that. So when the valuation is put into the actual accounts, certainly for the first few years, it will always be lower than your original valuation. These purchases were made to help support the revenue fund, general fund, by bringing in revenue for us every year. So we are not particularly concerned about the capital value of these at the moment. The capital value will reduce in the accounts, like I say, but it doesn't hit the bottom line. It just reduces in our balance sheet. And you would expect that over the next few years, these will actually start to outperform their cost of purchase. These were long-term purchases. We're not expecting to sell them again in the next 12, 24 months, while they still continue to perform for us. Again, I've got a bit about the Pwlb lending, because obviously that's significant if we are going to continue with commercial purchases. But as I say, that's a discussion for another time if we do decide to go forward with that. This report, it's important to look at proportionality. So this committee needs to understand how much of the revenue account is supported by these types of investment. So first of all, we have got the Treasury Management investments here, and you can see that the figures that they bring in every year. And as a proportion of our budget requirement, they bring in around about 7%. So those are our Treasury investments, investments of surplus funds and positive cash flow. Our non-Treasury investment income here, we've got load interest and these commercial rents. So again, you can see the proportion that they form of our budget requirement, and they are obviously a lot higher proportion. So what that's showing you as a committee is that how much you are relying on this income and these assets performing for you. One of the tables that we have to include in this is a table that's quite scarily called exposure to loss. So what we have to do in here is to look at all of our investments that potentially we could lose. So we've got £31 million in pooled funds. Potentially those pooled funds could be worth zero. Obviously unlikely that they would all suddenly reduce to zero overnight. So if we found we were worried about the values of those pooled funds, we could either decide to pull out of them, or we could decide to stay in them, ride it out and wait for their values to rise again. On-call funds, we keep all of our on-call funds in money market funds. They're recallable every day, so they are very, very low risk. Service investments, we've already looked at loans in the above table. Actually, the estimate of loss every year, like I say, is put in the accounts, but in theory, none of those loans could be repaid and we could lose 10 million. And again, with our commercial investments, they could all suddenly be worth nothing. So this table is a worst case scenario that we are required to present to this committee about our total exposure to risk, to loss. Obviously, we manage this risk in many ways by keeping an eye on all of these investments as closely as we possibly can and making sure they still continue to work for us. We have to report our investments that are funded by borrowing. Obviously, our Treasury Management investments, as I've said, they're not capital expenditure, they're investments of surplus funds. So they are not funded by borrowing at all, but the £56 million of our other investments and loans have been funded by borrowing. So in theory, that gives you an idea that if actually all of those value was suddenly zero, we'd still have £56 million of loans to repay. This final table just gives you the net rate of return, so you can see the return that all of these types of investments are bringing in for you. So Treasury Management investments are bringing in about 4.5% at the moment. I'm hoping that may well be higher actually by the end of the year, and it is looking to increase. On-call Treasury Management investments are not bringing anything in, so we are keeping our investments as low as we possibly can, just cash flow funds really kept on call. Service investment loans, obviously those loans are at a fixed rate and they are bringing us in more than they're costing us to borrow, so that's great. And our commercial investments are bringing in over 6% gross. Obviously there are financing costs with those because we have to set aside MRP, but that goes to repay the borrowing, so that actually reduces the risk on those debts. I think that's enough tables for you to go through. I'm happy to take any questions. You're either muted or I can't hear you.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just going to say thank you very much for that lovely, very explanatory report. And it does feel like we're very safe in your hands. So it's very good to know. Does any members of the council wish to ask a question, please? Mrs. Monteith. Do members of the executive like to ask any questions, please? I think you've explained very well where where we have, excuse me, where we have areas of concern, that you've covered them very, very well. So I think that's excellent. Well, with that then, this is the recommendations are to recommend the investment strategy for the 2021-22 to the council for approval. I'd like to move that recommendation. Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor Gilling has seconded that. Can all those in favour, all those against, please show. Anyone wish to abstain? No, I think that's clearly carried. Mr. Monteith, that
Yes,
recommendation is carried.
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Leader. So the investment strategy, again, as the item before, will go to full council on the 24th of March for final approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Mrs. Monteith. Thank you. So we're now on item 11. Item 11, agenda item 11 is the discretionary housing payments policy, which was revised in April 2021. Will be revised in April 2021. Before further ado, I think this is the discretionary payment scheme is designed to provide customers that are in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit with housing element with further financial assistance when it's considered that additional help is required for housing costs or solutions. So I'd now like to hand us over to Sean Warren, please. Welcome, Sean, to the meeting. I hope you can hear me clearly.
I can, yes, thank you.
Thank you. We've had a lot of problems today, Sean, so it's over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I'm here to present the discretionary housing payment policy for 21-22. As you may be aware, it is a legal requirement for the local authority to provide help through the discretionary housing payment scheme through the DWP funding. So again, we are going to be doing it for the forthcoming year. As you will have seen from the report that I sent through, there is a projected underspend for the current year, 2021, for approximately £67,000. You will also see that this is the first underspend we as a council have had since 2016-17. Within this current year, we've received 437 applications as at week 44, awarding 279 applications and declining 158. I believe this shows that we are not paying money out unnecessarily to people, and we are giving careful consideration to each application. The report that I've sent through, again specifically for this current year, states there are two main reasons for the underspend for this year. That being an increase in local housing allowance rates, which is what housing benefits is based on for 2021, and that was due to the pandemic. The local housing allowance rates for this year were increased between £3.85 per week and £40.51 per week, depending on the property type, the property need, and the area of Sedgemoor that the person lives in. So unlike previous years, where the local housing allowance rates have been relatively stable, there has been a huge increase in what we can pay through housing benefits without the need for discretionary housing payments. And indeed, you may also be aware that there were other increases due to the pandemic with other welfare benefits. For example, the £20 per week increase to universal credit and working tax credit. So whilst there is a projected underspend for this current year, moving forward for 21-22, the DWP are still yet to announce what the allocation is going to be for Sedgemoor District Council, and so that does make it hard to plan moving forward. However, as we do every year, there will be uptake exercises that we do with residents, whether that be directly ourselves through our own media channels or through other agencies like the Citizens Advice Bureau. But it is still important we get the message out there to the correct people so that actually no one is left in any financial hardship unnecessarily. The DHPs continue to protect tenancies within the Sedgemoor area, and it also relieves pressure from our housing advice team. If we didn't help through the discretionary housing payments, there is the potential there to be more homeless applications and more people being evicted from their properties. So it is still a really important scheme that we continue to run. And although the applications that we've received are down from previous years this year, we have still seen a large number of applications, as I explained earlier. I don't have anything else to add at this point, but I am more than happy to ask questions that may have come from what I've said today or through the report that I've submitted.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warren. Thank you for that report. Can I ask, and members of the council, does anybody wish to ask a question? Members of the executive? The only question I had, I'm just waiting for anyone to come through. When you say that discretionary housing are designed to provide customers in receipt, and then you go, there are some shortfalls. With the shortfalls, additions to the rent due to outstanding rent issues and shortfalls due to uncertain sanctions on benefit entitlement, what happens to those people? Where do they, there seems to be a little drop in the net somewhere. Do they get covered in other areas or?
The purpose of the sanction from the Department for Work and Pensions is because it could be that they've not abided by the contract that they've entered into with the Department for Work and Pensions. So, for example, when somebody makes an application for contribution-based job seekers allowance or indeed universal credit, they do sign up to an agreement to say that they will do certain things to try and come off those benefits. So, for example, searching for work if you're claiming job seekers allowance. Those sanctions is where that contract is broken. Now, obviously, benefit entitlement would be sanctioned and therefore decreased. And unfortunately, the discretionary housing payment scheme and us as a housing benefit department would not be able to make up that shortfall because it would go against what the Department for Work and Pensions is trying to achieve. So in answer to your question, there is no specific help available to those people, but they can ask for an appeal against the sanction with the Department for Work and Pensions, and it would be down to the DWP to decide whether the sanction is then subsequently lifted or not lifted.
Okay, thank you for that. That's very helpful. Okay. Thank you very much. Does anybody, I just noticed with Councillor Smedley, the leader of the Labour group, do you wish to say anything, Councillor Smedley? You've just entered the arena.
I'm fine, thanks, Jill.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Smedley. Okay, well, if no one else has any questions for, you've got off very lightly today, Mr. Warren, that's because it's an excellent report. So well done for that. Thank you very much. There is one recommendation, which is to adopt the discretionary housing payments policy, April 2021 as Appendix 1. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Janet Keane. All those in favour? All those against? Anyone against? Anyone wishing to abstain? I think that's clearly carried. Mr. Melhuish?
Yes, thank you very much, Deputy Leader. That is clearly carried. Agenda item 11 to adopt the discretionary housing payments policy from April 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Warren. Thank you for a very good report. Very explanatory, very helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.